16-time Gold Glove winner, a 3-time All-Star, 283 career wins, former baseball player Jim Kaat. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
I'll tell you what, with 16 Gold Gloves, you can make a fortune at Cash for Gold.
Yep, they're all real gold, huh?
You mean they're not?
Not that I know of. I'll have to check that out.
What do you think what's going on with this World Series here between the Cardinals and the Rangers?
Well, it's kind of a nice to have a day off. I'm sure Tony Larussa appreciated it with all the questions he had to answer. Of course, the day off might have been worse for him because it added to the questions. But, I think the bottom line, like he said, and I can understand that, when you score a couple runs early and you have all kinds of chances to add on to it, you don't. It just seems like bad things happen. But, with that being said, I think, they made a wise choice in calling the game off, and I hope that the weather is good there in St. Louis and we can see a good game today.
Is it fair to say that was Game 5 was one of LaRussa's worst as far as managerial difficulties? I mean, have you ever seen anything like the bullpen telephone not working the way it supposedly did not work?
I've been on teams where the bullpen phone, and in stadiums where the bullpen phone did not work, but then you could see the bullpen, and you had these, you had these signs with your arms, like your arm way up, left arm way up high was the tall left-hander, and if the guy was a little, I saw Ozzie Guillen do that with Bobby Jenks. He made a big circle with his arms, and he wanted the big heavy set guy,
right.
Things like that. You had signs where. But with these modern stadiums, one of the last things they do, I guess, is consult baseball people. And in Texas's case, it's difficult to see with that screen up there exactly who is warming up. Normally that's kind of a safety net. But that being said, I'm still not sure if Tony isn't being a little protective of somebody that made a mistake somewhere along the line. Like he said, the fact that he repeatedly said, "I don't throw my family under the bus, we don't throw each other under the bus," led me to believe that there was someone there who could have been thrown under the bus.
I mean, him and Dave Duncan have worked together since the early 80s with the White Sox, so you think they're on the same page.
Well, you'd think so. That's what I mean. It is bizarre. It's puzzling. I did a blog this morning on the MLB, which I do regularly on the MLB blog site, and it was this one was actually yesterday. I think about it was today about the bullpen phone calls, because I used to play a game with our bullpen coach Dave Ricketts when I was with the '82 Cardinals. We won the World Series that year, and when the phone would ring, there were 6 of us down there, and when the phone would ring, I would call out the name of who it was going to be for. And I would say Whitey Herzog that year was so consistent with who the call was for. I don't know if I ever missed one. If it was the 8th inning and start the 8th, it was Doug Bear. If there was a couple of men on, they wanted a double play ball. It was Jeff Lottie, a lefty, it was me. Then it was Suter, on and on. And nowadays, I guess there are so many different options, but what the bullpen coach would usually do is repeat the name of the pitcher. And then, in this case, did Derek Lilliquist hang up too quickly before Tony said the word Mott? Very bizarre, very, very hard to come up with what really happened. And maybe at some point down the road, Tony will, if ever, really tell us what the true story is if we're not getting it now.
Well, you knew something was wrong when Lance Lynn, who was scheduled to have the day off, all of a sudden comes in to issue an intentional walk. That's not something that Tony normally would do. If you follow Tony Larussa long enough, you have a pretty good idea, just the way you described the '82 Cardinals with Whitey, who's coming in next. It was baffling.
And just to support your point, what usually happens with the pitching coach, the manager, and the bullpen coach is that before the game, I know when Bruce Sutter would get used quite a bit, Whitey and Hub Kittle, Whitey would go to Hub or vice versa, and they'd say, "No, Suter's off limits tonight. We're not using him under any circumstances." And then Dave Ricketts, the bullpen coach, knew that too, so that if it was the eighth inning and say, in that case, Suter would sit on the bench, so they wouldn't even be tempted to use him. He wouldn't be in the bullpen. Then Ricketts already knew that, that guy was off limits, and you would assume that would have happened with Lynn. If he was off limits, I would have had him sit on the dugout bench, watch the game from there.
The game changed a lot during your career. I mean, you played during the term of about 5 presidents. I mean, when you started, pitchers would pitch complete games, go the whole way, and towards the end of your career, all of a sudden you had the specialists like the Bruce Suters, the Dan Quisenberries, guys like that.
Well, that was just the nature of the way the game evolved. Yes, the relief pitchers when I first came up were primarily pitchers who were not quite the same caliber as starters, and that was a good motivating factor. I remember I had a situation in the early 60s, and my shoulder was a little tight, and I had said to I think our coach at that time was Gordon Malzberger. I said, we pitched every 4 days, and I said, my shoulder's a little tight. I wonder if it would be helpful if I had an extra day. I'm like 22 years old. I don't know any better. And he said, well, that means it's going to throw off Pasquale and our other starters. So, we can start Lee Stang, but if he has a good game, we can't guarantee you, that you're going to start the next start. Well, immediately my shoulder felt just fine. I mean, you're not going to, but that was the mentality then. And then I think it started a little bit with Sparky in Cincinnati in the mid '70s, and then when he had Roger Craig coach for him in the '80s, though he had good solid starters there in Morris Rozema and Dan Petrie. But I think Tony, more than any other manager, is responsible for the bullpen matchups to the degree that we see him. Whitey did a great job at 82. He told me, he said, I want you to be a lefty-lefty specialist. I selfishly kind of wanted to start, and he said, I'm going to build my pitching staff from the 9th inning back, and I want to get the last 3 innings organized, and then if we have decent starters, which we did, we didn't have any Cy Young candidates, but we had decent starters. But the goal was when we had the lead after 6, we didn't lose very often. And I think somewhere in that late 70s, early 80s, that trend began to start. And then, Tony's taken it to the highest level, if you want to call it highest in terms of really specializing pitcher versus hitter.
Now, I tend to think that it's overdone lefty-lefty, righty-righty. I want the guy coming in out of the bullpen who's going to get out the batter. I don't care if he's left-handed throwing to righty and vice versa. But it seems like the managerial mind process is, okay, I got a left-handed batter coming up. I have to bring in this lefty. Rather than, okay, I'm going to build the best bullpen possible, even if it's all right-handed or all left-handed.
Well, that's true, and actually, we are now. When Whitey told me, he said, you're going to be a lefty-lefty specialist, like he had a guy named Steve Mingori in Kansas City when Quisenberry was the closer there in the late '70s, and so I immediately began to work on sidearm. I don't know if you remember Mike Myers a few years ago. He was a left-hand pitcher, pitched into his 40s. He was with the Tigers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, back and forth. And it was Al Kaline, actually, in Detroit that said, man, if you're going to face lefties, you ought to learn to sidearm, pitch from kind of down under, because that's so tough for lefties. Well, that's all I did. So I was strictly a lefty-lefty guy. But nowadays, with the circle change and guys that might have a little screwball, they are sometimes more effective, lefties more effective against right-hand hitters and vice versa. And, of course, that's all part of a manager and pitching coach knowing their staff.
That 65 World Series with the Twins and Dodgers was something else. I mean, what was it like starting 3 games against Sandy Koufax? And, I mean, you got a victory. You won a complete game against them.
Well, I was fortunate there. I remember in those days we didn't have a lot of games on television. The only game on TV was the Saturday game with Dizzy Dean, Pee Wee Reese, and when that game was on, the rest of us were playing as well because everybody played at 1:30 on Saturday afternoon. There weren't any of these crazy 4 o'clock or night games or things like that. So I never had seen Sandy Koufax pitch in person. I saw him pitch against the Yankees watching the game on television in '63. And I remember telling Johnny Sain after about 3 innings went by, I said, well, if I give up a run, this game's over. I mean, this guy was so far head and shoulders above any pitcher we'd seen. He was literally unhittable, and we scratched 2 runs, one of them unearned, off against him, and they had to take him out for a pinch hitter in the 7th inning. And I was fortunate to get a couple of runs. A couple of them I actually knocked in myself. So we won that game 5-1, but we never got another run off of him. So it was kind of a bittersweet experience. It was quite a thrill seeing a guy do what he did at the major league level. And then, you know, the unfortunate thing was I drew him in all 3 games. You know, he didn't pitch game 1 because of the Jewish holiday. Don Drysdale pitched game 1 on Yom Kippur, and Drysdale had a great line. He got knocked out. We knocked him around pretty good. When Walter Alston came out to take the ball around the 4th inning, he looked at Alston. He said, I bet you wish I was Jewish, don't you?
You're absolutely right. I mean, this Sandy Koufax, he had the most dominating stretch, I think, ever during that short, basically 5 to 7 year period.
He really did. I mean, for durability, you can look at Lolich in the 70s with the Tigers, or maybe late 60s, early 70s, and of course Maddox had a nice run. But when you look at innings, complete games, strikeout, walk ratio, wins, it'd be pretty hard to duplicate what Sandy did from 62 through 66.
Now, 4-man rotation versus 5-man rotation. Will we ever see a 4-man rotation again?
I'm afraid not. I think the managers, I know some have hinted at doing it, but I think, I tend to believe that agents have a big influence on how the game is run. And if they start a 4-man rotation and somebody comes up with a little tender arm or an injured arm, or there's a guy that's a 5th starter that's good enough to start, but he's in the bullpen, they're going to catch a lot of flack from the agents. Unfortunately, those that have experienced pitching on the 4th day and done it from the minor leagues on, I think those of us can attest to how much easier it is to be consistent with your control. Your arm recovers better. Every now and then, I can see giving a guy an extra day if he's had a stressful game, but it certainly is a better way to pitch than it was for years. But it isn't anymore, and I doubt if it ever will be.
Yeah, there's too much money involved. It's either have this young prospect whose arm you don't want to ruin because he's going to be cheap, or you have a high-priced veteran that if he goes on the disabled list, there's a guy making $10, $12 million.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is that, and you would hope that with the people in baseball that have had so much experience, that they would understand that having another day's rest is not a prevention against injury. We see more arm injuries today, I think, than we ever saw, and actually the arm recovers. If they did the study from I guess I would say a physiological or a kinesiology point of view, the muscles recover in 4 days, in 72 hours, and it just works out like clockwork that you get in such a nice routine, pitching every 4 days, and that's why guys used to do it and pitched a lot of complete games, and the pitchers today are certainly capable of doing that. It's just some organization has to go to the minor leagues and say we're going to start at our lowest minors and train our pitchers to do that, and I don't know if we'll ever see that.
That you're not in the Hall of Fame, I don't understand. I mean, with 283 career wins, you're number 31 on the all-time win list. I mean, I think that you definitely belong, and I'm looking at the names behind you that are in Jim Palmer and some of these guys, and I'm going, you were a better pitcher than Jim Palmer was. And I think with Burt Blyleven going in, I think people are going to realize how great of a pitcher you were. And 16 Gold Gloves, you didn't just pitch, you fielded your position.
Well, I appreciate those are nice words, but Jim Palmer was a dominant pitcher at a perennial 20-game winner, and a big part of the Orioles success that they had there. I had a nice career over a long period of time, maybe comparable to Bert's. I didn't have the strikeouts and the shutouts, but when you look at Palmer and Gibson and maybe Fergie Jenkins and guys that maybe their win total wasn't as high as mine, but they were really dominant pitchers. I mean, look at Koufax. Koufax, he won 166 games, but gosh, he was so dominant for a short period of time, and I think that's one of the prerequisites for Hall of Fame induction. Were you the best or one of the best at your position during that particular period of time? And, of course, Koufax was the best.
Thank you so much for your time, Jim. We got to get to our next guest, Bill Verdon, former manager, but we enjoyed talking to you, and good luck on your broadcasting and your blogging on the Major League Baseball Network.
Thanks very much. Say hi to Bill Verdon for me.